The following is a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.
Go Blazers! It is basketball season. March Madness is here, and of course, he is also here as well. Mark Ingram, the athletic director for the UAB Blazers. That's why it's called the UAB Director's Chair. It's a little podcast we do. It runs on TKR thanks to the tens of thousands of folks, 100,000 folks who download the TKR app. You can hear the show on our radio station every Monday through Friday, and of course, go to wherever you get your Tony Kurre Radio podcast. We're available on every major indice out there. Just search Tony Kurre Radio podcast and listen to the UAB Director's Chair. He's Mark Ingram. Mark, how you doing, brother? What's going on, man? Great time of the year.
Yeah, it sure is, Tony. Thanks for having me on, man.
It's great to have you on. When we're recording this show, it'll be Thursday, March 2nd, and this may be an historical date because Antoine Davis, the Detroit Mercy, they're playing Youngstown State, the number one seed in the Horizon League later on tonight. By the way, today starts 10 straight days of basketball all day, every day, which is just one of my favorite times. I love March Madness when the official tournament starts, but it bums me out because I know the more games we play, the less games we'll have to watch. But I mean, there is basketball from 10 o'clock in the morning till 11 o'clock at night, and it goes for about a week and a half. It's a fantastic time for college hoops fans, and I know UAB Blazer fans are super excited. Before we talk about the Blazers, though, Antoine Davis, he needs 26 points tonight to beat Pistol Pete's record, all-time record of NCAA scoring leaders. And that's a record that's been held for 53 years. And a lot of people aren't even aware of that record, which is just mind-boggling to me. What's your thoughts on records being broken and how hallowed is Pistol Pete's record that was set in 1970?
Well, isn't that the old saying is records are made to be broken, right?
Sure.
And good for Antoine Davis. And, you know, that's he's the son of Mike Davis, the former UAB basketball coach, who is the head coach at Detroit Mercy. And good for him. Good for that young man. But I'll say this. Let's pause on Antoine and just not to take away from what he's about to do. But think of Pistol Pete did this without a three-point line, and he did it, the shot clock situation. He probably wasn't a shot clock. Was there a shot clock when Pete played? I don't know.
I don't think so, no.
Yeah, so, you had teams that would stall it out and, go four corners and that kind of thing. For him to do that and to do it in 3 seasons, to set a record, that really, talk about a guy that people, I don't want to say have forgotten, but, as every year passes, more and more people will not know who Pete was, Pistol Pete, but just remarkable what he did, really remarkable. And then, to your point, to hold that record for 53 years tells you just how great he was. But obviously, Antoine Davis is a great scorer. He's a great player. He's got a great coach and his dad, and, was raised around the game and I'm sure has a really bright future ahead of him.
And, of course, with Antoine and COVID, he was given that extra year, so he's doing it in 5 years. Pistol Pete did it in 3 years. And Pete, of course, averaged 44 points a ball game. And to your point, I remember at one point, I think I was, 6 or 7 years old, listening to radio up in Cincinnati, where your wife is from, and Cincinnati was playing Memphis, and they won the game 16-14. They were a huge underdog, and you used to be able to just dribble the ball out for 8 or 9 minutes if you wanted to. And I cannot believe that we actually had games that were like that. Obviously, it's not a fun game to watch. But so amazing stuff. And it's amazing how he's actually doing it too, because they had to win their first turn. They were 13-18 going into their first tournament game. They had to win their first tournament game against, I believe it was Purdue Fort Worth, in order to give him the opportunity to play a second game to even break the record. So chances are he will break the record tonight. They will lose. It will be his last college game before perhaps he goes to the next level. This is the UAB Director's Chair. He's Mark Ingram. We'd love to get your email questions. info@tonykurreradio.net, info@tonykurreradio.net. Let's talk about your Blazers. 8 losses this year. Obviously a great season. Jelly Walker out for a few games, a little lull in the season. They're obviously better with him. They go into the tournament. Your thoughts as an athletic director? I know you're obviously a huge fan, but your chances of winning that conference tournament, and do you believe the UAB Blazers are going to have to win that in order to go to the big dance?
Well, we're definitely going to have to win the tournament to get to the big dance. Okay. Yes. This is a great time of year, starting today, how many games, all day basketball. If you love sports and especially basketball, this is just such a fun time. Really the next 3 weeks, the rest of this week, all of next week, and the following week, that first week of the NCAA tournament is just so fun to see all these games happen. And, teams win and they realize that opportunity to go to the NCAA tournament, which I sure hope expands, because that's what is so exciting about it is these matchups, these unusual matchups. Imagine, if Detroit Mercy is matched up against Kansas or Texas or whoever, that they might not ordinarily play. That's what's fun to watch. Villanova versus, St. Petersburg, and all of a sudden you've got a game, and so I love it. I love this time of the year. But, our team, you said it, had a bit of a lull there in the middle of the conference season when Jordan Walker was out. And but they really seem to be playing better. I mean, knock on wood here, and I'm pounding on my desk with both fists. But their last couple of games against Rice and then at Western Kentucky this past weekend, they have played so much better and so much more like the team that we knew we were capable of being. Now we have one more game, one more regular season game at Charlotte on Saturday, and then go to Frisco, Texas for the tournament next week. So we'll see. If we could beat Charlotte, that would be valuable. Obviously, you want to kind of move into the tournament in a positive way, feeling like you got sort of firing on all cylinders. But the tournament is about matchups, like every game is. But when you only have one day to prepare for the next matchup, it's about that matchup and how do we match up? Do we create matchup problems, or does the other team create matchup problems for us? And so while we know we're not going to be the 1 seed, obviously at this point, you want to be in the right spot on the bracket. So we'd like to hold this 3 seed because we feel like that gives us the best opportunity to advance all the way to the end. But you got to go play the game. And even though some of those teams have beaten us and we've beaten some of them, it's a new game, right? If we lost to North Texas, which we did twice this year, but that's 2 games we easily could have won, and we split with Florida Atlantic. Well, what does that mean? Nothing really. Not when you come to the tournament. I remember a few years ago, Southern Miss was like the 8 seed or something, and they ran through the thing. And I think they may have lost in the championship, but everybody thought they were sort of a first round team that would get bounced out, and they made it all the way to the championship and beat Middle Tennessee, who I think that was Kermit Davis's last year. That team was fantastic that he had, and it was just a shocking game. So, you better bring your A game because everybody else is.
Yeah, he's Mark Ingram, the UAB athletic director. He is nice enough to join us every single week. We're very grateful he does that here, the UAB director's chair. Info at TonyCurryRadio.net. We got an email question we'll get to second. Yeah, the 3 worst words a college basketball fan can hear is one bid league. I hate that. And UAB has been certainly in a situation with Conference USA in quite some time. Will that change with the AAC? What does the AAC normally get in? And obviously, I'm assuming that the competition will be a little stiffer. That will help them out with the strength of schedule standpoint and everything else. Obviously, you got to win basketball games to make it happen. But how will that change next year?
Yeah, well, we hope the same thing. They have been in the past getting about 4 teams in. This year, one of those being Houston, who at different times has been ranked number 1 in the country. So, between Houston, Memphis, Cincinnati, those 3 teams have been really, really strong. And then, Wichita State is in there. Temple is in there. Depends on those particular teams, what kind of year they're having. Who is it? Tulsa historically has had really good basketball. SMU kind of up and down has had some really good basketball. So, we're hoping that moving in, even though Cincinnati, Houston, and Central Florida are moving out, we keep Temple, we keep Memphis, we keep SMU, we keep Wichita State, and those are just the ones that have historically been so good in basketball. And then, then we enter, which, we're no slouch.
Yeah.
And North Texas has done really well over the last, call it 5 years. And so we feel like the teams coming in are strong, and that's not to dismiss the others that are coming in with us, but just pointing out a few that we think are going to help the league continue to be strong, and we all help each other My thing on the tournament, I look at it like this. In football, we talk about if a coach makes it to a bowl game, we talk about that as being a positive. Now, you can't go, I don't know that a coach could go 6-6 every year for, 5 years and everybody go, no, we're good because we made a bowl game. But getting to a bowl game is a mark of achievement that everybody looks at as okay, let's start here. I mean, when we reinstated football, that was our number one goal. Let's win enough games that we become bowl eligible. Mm-hmm. Then let's do it repeatedly so that it doesn't become a surprise to us, that we change what our expectations are, which is we expect to go to a bowl, not hope and pray and think that we won the lottery if we did. Let's get to a place where we know that this is definitely something that we do as a team, and we've achieved that. So you couldn't do that forever. Well, there's 130, I believe it's 133 football teams in the FBS level. 82 go to a bowl.
Yeah.
All right. So in men's basketball, there's 300, and I believe it's 53. I'm probably wrong, but it's 350 something. Mm-hmm. But let's call it 353, and only 68 go to the NCAA tournament. So think of that disparity, and how we view the success of a basketball coach is largely like the bowl game in football. We so critically judge the coach as to whether or not they got to that tournament or not. And then, of course, if they do it repeatedly, how do they do in the tournament? Do they advance or not? How far do they advance and all that? And so I would like to see, for the sake of the game, I'd like us to double the size of the tournament. I'd be in favor of 128. It's only one more game.
Yeah.
And I think that, in all sincerity, we look back at these tournaments, and it's the nun from Loyola Chicago that we still talk about, and the Peacocks of St. Peter's was that last year, the year before? Those teams making a run, Villanova making a run. Now, of course, Coach Jay Wright has retired, but they got themselves to a place where their fans and the rest of us sort of expected them to be in it. But the first year that they won that national title again, for the second time in school history, it was almost like, Maryland, Baltimore County making that run. It kind of felt like that a little bit, because let me tell you, Villanova is like Samford. It's a small city college. It's not some, for those who have not been to Philadelphia or never been to Villanova, it's a beautiful little campus, but it's just a little bitty campus out in the suburbs.
Yep.
With a small population of students, and it's the equivalent of Samford going to and winning the national title.
No,
it's a big deal. You've acted like it's not a big deal. It's a huge deal.
As a Xavier Musketeer fan, I can tell you I hate I hate Villanova. They have owned us even when they're bad, and they're considered bad this year. They're not going to get in, but I mean they have knocked us off twice. Now, to your point too, and I know a lot of fans, well, not even a lot of fans, there's some knuckleheads out there will sit there and say, why are we going to expand the field? They're not going to win it anyway. You know what? You don't have to win the 6 or 7 games in a row if they would expand to go to 7. To off center or off kilter the entire thing. If you're that 1 seed that gets beaten by that 16 seed, you're messing up people's brackets. And that's what the Cinderella story is all about. It's not that St. Peter's ends up winning the whole thing. Right. And you're allowing those kids more practices. You're allowing their fan base and their universities to feel that revelry, that fanaticism of continuing to play in March Madness. I totally agree with you. I think by doubling it, and to your point, you talked about the bowl games. You're talking roughly more than 2/3 of college football teams get to play extra games, and in college hoops, it's less than 1/5. I mean, that's ridiculous. Yeah, I mean, it really is. Ridiculous. So why not? Why not enjoy that? And for one more game, why not?
And the men's NIT is 32 teams. The women's NIT is 64.
Yeah.
So prior to this, what seems like a good conversation about expansion on the tournament, I've been a proponent of expanding the NIT.
Yeah.
Let's at least expand the NIT for all the same reasons that there's really good basketball teams that don't get an opportunity to keep playing, and they've had a really good season. Let's take us as a great example. If we don't win our tournament, then we're finished. Yeah. Now, depending on how we do, we ought to get an invitation to the NIT, but I don't know that we will. There's no certainty that we will. We ought to, but we don't know. And that's the point, is, are we a team that doesn't deserve to at least play in the NIT?
There's no doubt. And I remember, I think it was Manhattan, and maybe it was, Manhattan 5, 6, 7 years ago. Yeah. Right. They lost 3 or 4 games.
That's what makes it so fun, right?
And they didn't get an at-large. And I'm thinking they lost 3 games all year. I mean, for God's sakes, they should get an at-large at least. Because as a fan, I want to see that. And we want to see those upsets. So,
hey, those big teams that are so worried about it, hey, if you're so good, just beat them.
There you go. Mark Ingram, the athletic director here for the UAB Blazers, called the UAB Director's Chair. And he's only got a few minutes with us here. And I did want to get to an email because it's a great email. Greg from Southside says to athletic director Mark Ingram, great hire with Trent Dilfer. He said, now we got Nick Saban, Nate Oates, Bruce Pearl, Hugh Freeze, and Andy Kennedy and Trent Dilfer. He said, I'll take our 2 against any other pair of coaches. He wants to know, how much do coaches actually see each other and how often do they work together when it comes to recruiting? An interesting question because, a lot of times when you're bringing in basketball recruits, where do they go? They go to football games. Football guys go to basketball games because the seasons are different. How often do coaches actually see each other and how often do they work together?
Yeah, I think they do. And of course, that's going to depend on the nature of the coach and their experience and how open they are to those conversations. But I know that, I've had conversations with Coach Dilfer where he talks about meeting with the softball coach saying the same thing about how great he is and how much he's enjoyed talking to him. And they just bounce ideas off of each other. And quite honestly, they're foolish if they don't, right? And the first time that I experienced this, I remember I was working at Tennessee with Pat Summitt, and she won 8 national titles. And at some point, I think it was Bruce Pearl, who was also there at the time, said something about it, how he had met with Pat. And he says, she's right down the hall. She's won 8 national titles. Why would I not speak to her? Why would I not talk to her about what she's doing right? And these are things like, it can be small stuff like, hey, when your recruits come in, where do y'all go to dinner?
Yeah.
Where and why do you go there? Why did you pick that place? Is there a certain way that you tour people around campus, a certain order of which you tour people around campus? You start here and you go there, and why? Is there a certain professor that over time you've learned just does a great job in talking to prospects? The longer you are somewhere, the more you kind of know the subtle nuances and differences about what makes each campus unique and special and what sets it apart from other places. And I think successful people are unafraid to ask advice of other successful people.
Absolutely.
And that's just smart business.
All right, rock and roll question. And I had to bring this up because I saw the story this morning. Ozzy Osbourne's back in the news. He said now, 2 weeks ago, he said, unfortunately, for people who have been holding on to my tickets, he was supposed to be touring, I guess, later on this year. He's just not physically able to do that. Yeah. Now, he came out late last night and said, I've got to figure out a way to go back on tour. So he officially retired on his Instagram page, this long thing, and said, I'm done. I no longer can play. I will continue to make records. I will play concerts, but I just can't go on a worldwide tour. Now he's coming out and saying that if he can find one doctor that says you can physically go out and do a tour, I'm going to do it. So he's waiting and finding that doctor that will allow him to do that. Do you want to see Ozzy Osbourne go on the road one more time?
Well, I've seen Ozzy, and he's great. And, his voice is so unique. There's never a time that you would hear him sing and not know it's him.
Yep.
Maybe better or different than anybody else out there. There's nobody that sounds like him. And that's one of the things really it's not about really even his music. It's about his sound. For me personally, I just love his sound. So I'd love to see him again. But, the thing that would be difficult, look, I saw him, gosh, it's more than 20 years ago, maybe 25 years ago, I saw him. And he was kind of hobbling around then, so he wasn't getting around great, I guess, compared to today he was. But, I can appreciate it wouldn't be the same, it wouldn't be the same show, but it's still him, man. Still biting heads off of bats and all that.
I wouldn't even have a problem with him sitting in a wheelchair or a bar stool. I mean, if it meant that physically he could sing. And I will say this, and I know you've seen enough concerts. If you've got a good back band, you got a band that's super tight, The vocals are one small part of that because most of the time everyone recognizes your music. They're singing along with it anyway. So as long as he can get through the music and get through, an hour and 15-minute set, I say bring him back because I think the only way Ozzy Osbourne's going to die is I think he wants to do it on stage. I hope it's not anytime soon, but at the age of 72, he's still got some left in the tank. Hey, next week we'll continue to talk about some classic rock. You had a great idea before we started the show about doing some Mount Rushmore stuff. We did the Mount Rushmore of bands this past week. We'll do the Mount Rushmore of vocalists next week. And we'd love to get your thoughts on it too. info@TonyCurryRadio.net, info@TonyCurryRadio.net. Send us what you think should be on the Mount Rushmore, and we'll give our 4 coming up starting next week right here on the UAB Director's Chair. Mark, I know you're busy, man. Go get after it, and thank you so much for your time.
I appreciate it, man. Hey, remember Axl Rose? He sang, you said wheelchair. He sang from like a throne. He had broken
his leg. He broke his leg a week before he was supposed to start singing because Brian obviously had some hearing issues. He knocked it out of the park.
Yeah.
He did okay.
I'd be okay with Ozzy doing that same thing. And I messed up your question last week on the Mount Rushmore bands. We'll do that one too.
Okay.
But next week let's do vocalists, and then we'll move through, and then we'll pick out bands all together.
Have a great week, brother. Thank you.
You, man. See ya.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Curry Radio.